I think you'll see content around the internet that points out the ways it's failed. They'll say, oh, look, Chat GPT wrote this and it's terrible and I can do better as a human. And there's issues with that. But also sometimes seeing something that's wrong is easier to spot than starting with a blank page.
Hi, and welcome to the Bright Minds of E-commerce podcast. I'm Dana, founder of Bright Red Marketing, and after helping so many businesses in the e-commerce space over the years, I wanted to bring you the best advice Australian experts in e-commerce and e-commerce store owners had to offer. If you want relatable stories and actionable advice and the latest Facebook advertising strategies, you're in the right place. So let's get into today's episode. On today's episode, we're joined once again by Ami Williamson from Damn Right. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, it's nice to be back.
It's so good to have you back. So we're here to talk all things Chat GPT. For those who are listening that don't know what it is or haven't dabbled yet, what is Chat GPT?
So it's what they call a large language model, which is a totally boring name, but basically it is trained on how language works. It's trained on the entire internet up to a certain date. It works basically like a language prediction machine. And all that sounds really nerdy and boring and not helpful at all. But what that means is it is trained to predict what response you want from it, depending on the information that you feed it and the questions that you ask it. Chat GPT specifically is the actual chat interface. So it's kind of like old school MSN Messenger back in like the early 2000s, chatting with your mate. There are some limitations to it, which we can get into if you want.
Give us the rundown.
Okay, so it is amazing, obviously. Otherwise, I would not be here chatting about it. But it does have limitations in terms of memory. So it doesn't really hold on to too much information at once and it can forget. It can also be very confidently wrong. So it can spit out stuff that is just factually inaccurate. So you kind of need to know what you're doing to assess the output. It also, at the moment, doesn't easily have access to the internet in real time. Like it was trained up until, I think, 2021 maybe. And that means that anything you ask it that has happened since then, it doesn't have any working knowledge of that.
So we're obviously talking about Chat GPT today, but there are other AI models and things that are out there. Are they all working similar, just with different features? What's sort of the difference between them?
Yeah, so it's a very quickly evolving space. ChatGPT seems to be the one that people are most familiar with because it's kind of everywhere at the moment. I mean, that's by OpenAI. There are different language models that are being developed at the same time. There are different tools. So you've probably seen like Jasper, Copy.ai, WordTune. There are so many. What I can gather with these is that a lot of them are already built on top of GPT-4, which is what ChatGPT uses. And it's putting a really nice user interface on top of that tool. And it also, I think Copy.ai, they've trained in specific copywriting techniques. So it's instead of you just going to ChatGPT and having to give it all of that intel, which you can do quite easily, it's kind of like a shortcut.
Fantastic. So what can a business use Chat GPT for? I think that's what we're here for. Everyone's talking about how much it can save people time, but what does that look like?
Yeah. Why should you care? Exactly.
What's in it for everyone listening?
So many things. And this is what gets me really excited as a small business owner. Like the obvious thing is you can use it to generate copy and content, which we need so much of when running a small business. And I'll get to that in a moment, but I also wanted to cover, because I think those are the obvious things that people use it for, like generate a certain amount of headlines for this article or whatever. But you can take a step back and use it for the strategy that goes behind those things. So the brand strategy, the ideation, the messaging, like the research and analysis, like your customer research, your competitor analysis, like all of those things that sit behind the copy and content you want to put out into the world and kind of sit behind everything you do in your business. You can actually use something like ChatGPT to help you work through those and refine those. For me, that's the part that I get even more excited about. And as you're chatting back and forth with it, you can actually use it to drill down further. It may give you some output and it shows you where the holes are in your thinking and your reasoning, and it can help you actually make connections that you wouldn't have made before. So it's really powerful to use in that way. The copy and content, obviously, like as a copywriter, as I mentioned, you think about an e-commerce business, you've got your website, you've got your product descriptions, you've got your automated emails, you've got your campaign emails, you've got all the social content, and that's where it can also help. So if you train it up on what your brand is like, what your brand's values are, or personality, or what it does, or your audience, like what are they interested in, then you can actually ask it to generate ideas for content. for specific content. So say you want Instagram stuff, you can ask it to generate content topics. You could ask it to outline those topics. And then you could even ask it to generate the content itself. It's mind-blowing.
It is possibly my favorite thing to come out of technology in a while. I'm I can't stare at a blank screen kind of person. So to be like, I need to write a blog post and I'm just staring at the little thing flashing and I can't do it. Whereas now I go, Chat GPT, I need this, do this, give me an outline. And then you can just like tear it apart, put it back together, and it's fantastic. So I'm a big fan of using it for that idea generation.
I think you'll see content around the internet that points out the ways it's failed. They'll say, oh, look, Chat GPT wrote this and it's terrible and I can do better as a human. And there's issues with that. But also sometimes seeing something that's wrong is easier to spot than starting with a blank page. Like you look at it and you go, okay, that's actually not what I believe or my opinion on that thing, that topic. And it's easier for me to then riff off of that than to just sit down and go, okay, what are all of my thoughts about, what do I think? I think it's time for another coffee break.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. So let's just go through a couple of those. If you want to use it for idea generation, what are some of the best ways to do that?
Yeah. So I'm not a content strategist specifically, but obviously I'm a small business owner that exists on the internet and has to generate content. For me, it's going back to the actual brand. So if we look at the brand's mission, its values, its vision, its personality, what's it actually sell? And then everything related to that. What problem is it solving? What things are its audience interested in already that we can riff off of? The more of that you can feed into Chat GPT, the better ideas it can give you. If you go in there today, it is trained on the entire internet. If you go in there today and just literally pop in, generate 20 content ideas or content themes for me, it's going to give you something super generic because you haven't actually asked for anything specific.
Yeah. It's one of those things. What do they say that you get, the answer you get is as good as the question that you ask?
Absolutely. That's it. It's literally, it comes down to the questions you're asking it and the context that you give it, the specifics that you give it.
I've seen so many articles and TikTok videos on how to write a good prompt. But do you have any keys on how to write a good prompt? Because that's the good one. I tried one that someone on the internet gave me the other day and the response was terrible. But I think that's the thing now. It's trial and error. But do you have any tips on how to make a good prompt?
Absolutely. So first up, 2 things before I get into like the specifics of how to write a good prompt. The first thing is that you can reprompt it. So I feel like getting caught up on it needs to be the perfect prompt from the very start can really hold people back. Just get in there and you can always correct it as you go. And you can say, actually, I don't want that voice to sound this way. I want it to sound this way. Actually, avoid using this word, like all those sorts of things. So don't get too caught up. And also you can use it to create the prompts. I don't know if many people know this hack, but you can actually ask it. You can say, help me craft a prompt to get a certain output from it. It's like whatever end goal you've got in mind, if you can be specific with that. And then you can actually say to it, I want you to ask me questions to clarify and basically drill down until we get to that one good prompt that you can then feed back into it. Another hack is that if you get something really good out of it, you can actually ask it, what prompt should I use in the future to get the same output? So if you've had to go back and forth with it a little bit, actually ask it at the end, what prompt in future would get that same output without the back and forth? And it can just give you that, which is amazing.
So clever. You get like 20 questions in and you're like, oh, finally we got the good answer. But that's a tip and a half. That one. Yeah.
It can. And as much as I think it can be a time-saving tool, it can also be an absolute time suck, like a fun one. But there is a rabbit hole that you can fall down very easily.
100%.
The specifics of the prompts, though, it's all about those details, the context, the specifics. Once again, it's that jack of all trades. It's trained on everything. And unless you can really point it in the right direction, and one of the hacks is to basically tell it how to act. So you'll say, act as a content strategist, act as a copywriter, act as a brand strategist. And that kind of helps just point it in the right direction of what knowledge it should be using to base its response on, basically. In terms of copywriting, it's like if you can tell it the target audience, the format, so is it an email, is it a website page, the length, what call to action that you want it to end with, what the main points you want covered. So often if you don't tell it the opinions that you want or the key points that you want covered, it will happily bring up its own opinion And the other big one is obviously voice. If you can get super specific with your brand voice, that's when it's truly magical.
Wonderful. Do you have any tips on how to actually get that brand voice? Teach it that, obviously, you said it hasn't got the best memory, but is there a way around that?
Absolutely. So yeah, it will default to that basic generic bland voice if you don't point it in the right direction. As a copywriter, if a brand came to me and said, I have a bold voice, I could generally glean what that might mean. But at the end of the day, bold is actually a super vague, overarching term, and it can look so different from brand to brand. Or, fun. So if you look at go-to skincare versus who gives a crap versus koala mattresses, all three brands have a fun tone to their voice, and yet they all sound extremely difficult. Different. Yeah, the difficulty is actually in, even as a human, being able to properly analyze and define that voice and then replicate it. Like if you give any copywriter my brand has a fun voice, you're not going to get something consistent back. And it's the same with Chat GPT. So what I mean by that is you actually want to drill down into the specifics. If you use a lot of question marks, do you have long flow-on sentences? Is there a mix, or is it all very short and punchy? So that cadence or flow, the punctuation, the pop culture references, like emojis, like all that sort of stuff that it's easy to have living inside your head. But if you can get specific about that stuff and then feed it to any sort of writer, whether it's AI or human or even for yourself, that's when you can start to be more consistent with it. I know when I'm in there and I'm asking it to do stuff in a certain voice and I see where it's going wrong, I can start to work out the kinks of it. I can start to go, okay, so it thinks this is a bold voice. What other words could I use in there? Could I use irreverent? Could I use sassy? Just play with the different tones. And that's where the magic comes in. Whereas it's not a human copywriter where you've just given them these 3 overarching tone words and you've got your copy back and you're like, oh God, it's all wrong. What do? I don't want to hurt their feelings. They're going to be so annoyed at me. And to be fair, they probably won't. Maybe. I should say maybe. But the difference is you can go back to Chat GPT and you can rework it in real time.
Amazing. You don't have to send off the brief, wait for them to work on it for 2 weeks, come back and be like, I did not explain that very well.
Exactly. Like for me, I just write in my brand voice. I don't actually have a style guide for my own. It's kind of like the cobbler's shoes. But all I did was copy and paste some of the content that I really liked the tone of that I'd written and asked it to analyze it and then asked it to use that voice. And for me, it brought up things that I didn't know were there. Like were probably subconsciously in there. They were there. So that's another hack, that if you've got content that you like the sound of, pop it in there and ask it to analyze and define the brand voice used.
So once you sort of have some wording around the brand voice, do you just paste that into Chat GPT and say, use this brand voice? Is it that simple?
Yeah. So when you go in, there's like little different chat windows and it has a memory within that chat window. So the one where I first got it to analyze my brand voice, I said to it, remember this is the damn right voice. And so now in future, if I say, give me XYZ in the damn right voice, it can replicate it. The only issue is that memory thing. So eventually it will forget and you'll see when it starts to go off track. And so you can also either ask it how to reprompt it for that. So ask it to give you a concise prompt to get that voice in future. And it's just copy paste. So even if you start a new chat window, once again, you can just copy paste and it knows what it's doing.
I definitely need to play with it more. I've used it a lot for just that staring at blank screens, needing headlines en masse to kind of not be staring at a blank screen. But the brand voice part, I think, is really important. And I think probably a piece that a lot of people are missing when they're playing with it. So you get back the results. What do you do with them to then make them publish worthy?
Okay. So for me, it's very rarely would it be copy and paste and it's ready to go. So obviously factually, you want to check it's factually accurate. It's not making any errors there. Also that it's not plagiarized from another site. I haven't seen any examples of this yet, but considering it's trained on the internet, you can see that there's a potential for it to just rip a sentence or a paragraph off from somewhere else. We would hate that. So there are plagiarism checking tools that you can use to check for that. And then I'll also often just do a final voice sweep. This might just be because I'm a copywriter and I'm a control freak, but I'll just add in little bits that I would naturally say. So I'll read it through literally out loud and go, okay, I would actually start that sentence with an and or a but or a because, with those contractions, just to make it that little bit more conversational. There's probably a way I can just train Chat GPT to do that for me, but I don't know if it's like this mindset thing where I'm like, no, but I created it.
I want that final little bit of control to be like, no, I did this. They helped.
Yeah.
But I want that, like, this is still something that I've contributed to.
Exactly. So that's what I will do.
Lovely. So other than proofing it, running it through a plagiarism checker, and obviously checking its facts, there's nothing else that you do at the end to just like polish it a little bit?
Not really. I've noticed when I ask it to generate like Instagram captions, or I'll even just say content and it just assumes Instagram at this point, it gets very emoji happy very quickly. And once again, I probably should just go in there and be like, hey, chill on the emojis, or here are the specific emojis I use. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I just haven't had time to do that. So I'll go in and be like, no, not that emoji, remove these emojis, put in these ones. It really is just those little tweaks to the voice for me.
Fantastic. Your prompts must be better than mine because I have to do majority.
Oh, that still happens.
Maybe everyone needs to do that after this. I'll have better prompts. Want help with your Facebook and Instagram ads? Remember, you can always book in a free strategy session at brightredmarketing.com.au/free-strategy-session. We'll run through all of your ads, see what's working and what's not, and no sales pitch, I promise. So let's get back to today's episode. Is there anything that you don't think you should use Chat GPT for?
Okay, so the two main considerations at the moment are copyright, which the law is going to take a while to catch up, I believe. We're going to see it with image-based and music-based first, which is becoming a thing now. Yeah, it kind of comes down to like my own ethical viewpoint on writing. I don't really see it the same as ripping off an artist's work or a photographer's work and mimicking that. I don't think writing is the same. And same with music. Like, I guess if I went in there and I asked it to constantly replicate a brand voice that's not my own, and I used, it starts to get a bit murky. I'm not entirely sure where, unless you're literally plagiarizing someone else's stuff, that's not ChatGPT's fault if you're choosing to plagiarize someone else's literal content, like copy and paste. So that's the copyright side of things. And I don't even know how long it's going to take for the law to catch up.
I imagine a very long time. Like they're still catching up on other technology that we've had for decades
on the internet as a whole.
Yeah, they still haven't caught up with internet stuff. I don't think people even understand it enough. I mean, we've all seen politicians being interviewed about tech and they have no idea. So I think it's going to be a long time before that sort of stuff.
It is. And when you look at a global scale, how's that going to come in?
Yeah.
The other thing is privacy. So I wouldn't be putting any data that you want to keep private in there. That said, they introduced a feature. So basically, Italy turned around and said, no Chat GPT. It doesn't meet our privacy regulations. We will be banning it in our company within 30 days unless they comply with this. In response, OpenAI have given you the option to turn on privacy settings, but the catch is that it doesn't remember your conversation. So when I talk about building up that memory and training it, it's a double-edged sword. They also hinted that they're looking at bringing out a business subscription that would also tackle this. So for me personally, I would be looking at that when it comes out. Hopefully it's at an affordable price point for small business owners. To glean what they're saying, like reading between the lines, it would be a subscription where you could then use it. It's going to have that memory feature, hopefully, but also not use your data to train future models, because that's where the privacy thing comes in. It's a training model at the moment, particularly the free version.
I think that's where a lot of the dramas with the music and the art one are coming in, because they're training it off other people's art, which, as we said, is kind of different to words. Because it's different, but it's so I think it's just going to be messy for a little while.
It is. And I think the Adobe one, I haven't played around with any of the image ones yet, but I remember seeing something about the Adobe one not being trained on. It's only stuff that they have the license to. So it's stock stuff that they've got license to use. And therefore, like, that kind of helps overcome the ethical issue with the image stuff.
Yeah, amazing. Just a weird question. Do you say please and thank you to the AI bots?
Sometimes. It depends on my mood. Just like in real life. I've seen some hot takes on Twitter about this, about how, we need to get to the point where, just to be uber productive, we just drop all the niceties and we treat it like the robot that it is. For me, it's like, if I would naturally put in a please, a thank you, a can you give me, then I'm going to do that. I'm not going to take the pause for a second to be like, oh no, it's a robot. Let's delete that. Let's not be nice to it. So if it naturally comes in there, I leave it in there. I'm not entirely sure if it does impact the output? Like if you're really nice to it, is it going to give you better stuff?
I'm a weirdo who says thank you to my Google Home. So
yes. Just think of all the people that like yell at Alexa and stuff.
yeah, it's funny.
But it's also like, yeah, I don't think it hurts at all. I don't think we need to be focusing on productivity at all costs. You can say please and thank you if you want to. It's okay.
I've got a friend who says please and thank you in case there's an AI uprising. And then at least the AI knows that she was polite and kind.
That is also one of the big things.
Yeah, I'll say please and thank you. Then the AI knows I'm a nice person.
Yeah, they'll come for you last.
You said thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We covered a lot, but is there anything that you think we've missed?
My one thing would be that as I see it with the rise in AI where it is now, and this is only the beginning, we're early stages, it's only going to get better at what it does. We're about to see even more content on the internet and in general in life. And it's going to be quite predictable stuff. It's going to be quite generic, bland, boring. And so how do we differentiate brands going forward to be less predictable, to make connections that aren't logical, that don't make sense, take inspiration from unexpected sources? One example of that is like, I love this one. It's a little bit morbid, but you know the Nike tagline, "Just Do It"? That's actually a quote that they got from the last words of a convicted murderer before they were put to death. And that's literally the inspiration for Nike's tagline, which,
My goodness.
how would AI ever come up with that unless you specifically asked it to mine the last words of convicted murderers? So for me, it's like, what can we do that's a little less predictable so that we can still stand out amongst the sea of content?
I think that's such a good point. I saw an article yesterday where some dude bought one of the really high-end AI rewriting, generating programs. He's like 2,500 for a month or something. And he published 700 articles in the month to like make his SEO go up. Like he did all the research for him. Like the AI was that clever and his rankings went up hugely. But like your point being, if everyone did that in a month and all of a sudden Google had an additional 700 articles from everyone and it's all written by AI and it's all the same generic stuff, like no one's going to stand out anymore. So I think that's a really good point that, yeah, it's cool you can write an article, but what's going to make your article different to everyone else's?
That's exactly it. And like Google specifically, I mean, with SEO, I always tell clients, I'm not an SEO expert at all. But at the end of the day, Google's algorithm is trying to figure out what people, like actual humans, want to read. And so that's what we need to keep in mind, that we're long past the days of keyword stuffing and like hiding keywords in the bottom of the page in different colored font. It's at the end of the day, what do people want, as well as making less predictable content, making those unexpected choices when you can. It can be as simple as bringing it back to what do people actually value? What do they want to read and engage with above anything else?
Yeah, 100%. I think we're going to see a lot of people putting out a lot of trash, and the ones that do it really well, have a good brand voice, do something different. I think they're going to be the ones that see the success, because you're right, it's going to be too much.
Absolutely, way too much.
Fascinating. Well, this has been very insightful chat. I use Chat GPT. I think it's fantastic and I've learned a lot. So I hope that our listeners also have learned a lot, and if they have not already dabbled, we'll go dabble. And if they have dabbled and use it a lot, can get a little bit better quality content out of it.
I hope so too.
Wonderful. So if anyone wants to reach out, have a chat, learn more about Chat GPT, what are the best ways people can reach you?
Okay, so my actual business name is Damnwrite, DAMNWRITE, Instagram, or my actual website, which is damnwrite.com.au. Both of those spots, you can actually find my free guide to using Chat GPT, which is called Chat GPT Unleashed. And it does cover, like, in more depth, a lot of what we've gone over today. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by it, or you're just curious and want to jump in, grab that, have a look, and have fun.
Amazing. We'll put the link to that one in the show notes, so it's nice and easy for people to find if they want to find that. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been amazing to have you back and amazing to chat all things Chat GPT.
Anytime. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for listening to the Bright Minds of E-commerce podcast. As always, you'll find the show notes at brightredmarketing.com.au/episode 48. Thanks for listening.